families back together. One of the things that was said to me when I was visiting by one of the jailers, one of the prison population, she said, you know, the children don't want to come to visit. And then they set up uh, a line that the children could go to a particular location under one of the superintendents of school, Marion Bolden. They could go to a location and they could call their parents and do a direct contact from Broadway in Newark. But I don't imagine that lasted very long. I am interested in that because certainly all of those children whose parents are incarcerated need to be in touch with them. They don't need to be isolated and see your mother when she gets out and all those kinds of things. You know, at one time at East Jersey, the children couldn't even visit the parents.
Yeah.
And, you know, and asking the prison officials, they just say, well, we made an determination. What is going on here? Because all you have to do is remember how you wish to be treated. My father taught me that.
Yeah.
Wish how would treat the people how you wish to be treated, and we wouldn't have so much of a problem. But it's the dent, it's Altari, it's the
Alterique.
dent that we make when we
So
don't, you know, consider other people's lives. Those children need their parents, and they need them with them. But if they're incarcerated, they at least could see that the children are in contact with the parents. They could at least see that. Now, a lot, I guess, has to do with can we communicate with the Department of Corrections? And I wanted to ask if anybody has been able to be in touch with the commissioners or anybody lately.
Can I answer, Kathleen?
Yeah.
So, a couple of things. Just before Hicks resigned or was tossed out, whichever thing happened, he appointed a commissioner of women. Her name is Helena Tomei. And actually I hadn't thought of it, but I have a meeting with her Thursday, a Zoom, of course, and I'm going to ask her about visitation and what's going on with that. The other thing is that I got a phone call last week, and I can't remember the woman's name, but she's temporary commissioner. She's been appointed temporary commissioner by the governor, and she'll be on for at least 9 months and sounds good.
Okay.
I don't know if someone can be good in that position, but she reached out. She made the phone call. So I have hopes for an ongoing dialogue with her, and she seemed particularly interested in Edna, and very conscious of the fact that whatever changes were going to be made there had impact on all the prisons in New Jersey.
Exactly. Well, I'm looking forward to something happening because I realized some of those women in the Edna Mahan had sentences like for 10 years. So if they're getting out, they need to be ready to go to work, go somewhere and rejoin their homes. And I didn't see a lot of that going on. Most of the women we talked to were saying, they wanted to relocate, but they didn't really have a plan. They were just talking. And there needs to be a plan. And I'm thinking that the therapies, the social emotional supports that are needed have to be rethought and relooked at. I don't know what the status of it is now, but I got plenty of complaints from East Jersey about not having
Mhm.
enough access to people who would do therapy for the prisoners. And it seemed that they placed it on if the prisoner didn't fill out the forms, he can't get it. But I think it was even more than that. I think they're very limited and they're just not saying a lot. Um, I particularly communicate with the veterans, but I haven't heard from the veterans lately. And Lions Institute Hospital had been sending people, but even there, I couldn't get a good idea on how many of the prisons requested aid and were able to get support,
Mhm.
and how many didn't. Well, I see our time is moving on, so I'm going to ask uh, Brother Biden to offer us an opening prayer, and then we'll start. I have a few things that I want to present. All right, Brother Biden.
Yeah, maybe for a moment just close our eyes and meditate to our Heavenly Father. Our Heavenly Father, dear Jesus, thank you again for providing us this 112th year of our NAACP. We have come a long way, but just as we have discussed the issues with women in prison and with veterans that are also incarcerated and veterans that are still looking for their benefits based upon their frontline service. We continue to ask for your blessings, for your grace, and for your protection as we go forward. Our hope is not only to change and bring civil rights, but our bottom line hope is to end poverty where it's needed to be ended. And that's a lot of places in the USA and certainly in the world. Give us protection from the virus that is still among us and those viruses that we are still learning about. Protect us, protect the elderly, protect our children, and let us move forward again in your grace with your protection. For the bottom line, when we stand in front of you, our Heavenly Father, we are going to be judged by our service to humanity and our service not only to our USA brothers and sisters, but to the world. Again, dear Father, bless us as we go forward in the 112th year of our NAACP. Amen.
And thank you very much, Brother Biden. We'll go forward now. And as I said, I wanted to bring some information that I think is pertinent to what we're trying to do, uh, because the NAACP is often, I guess, mischaracterized. And I was able to, greetings, I was able to attend the May 18th program called Policing the Police by the National NAACP. And I'd like to just bring a couple of points to summarize what was said, because as you know, many people have joined the campaign to defund the police, but that is not the position of the NAACP. The position of the NAACP would be to strengthen law enforcement and to retrain. So with that, we understand that the national NAACP is asking for standard training by the Department of Justice. They're asking for all of the state conferences and therefore all of the units like Irvington, NAACP, to look at eliminating qualified immunity, which would mean that none of law enforcement is exempt from having their misconduct records reported. The NAACP is asking to look at the police union contracts and brings attention to the fact that many of law enforcement have been fired, but because of their unions have been rehired. They're asking for the database that will show cross-country where transfers were made agency to agency to find out what officers have been moved from department to department or agency to agency with a history of complaints of law enforcement abuse. And so the National NAACP will be holding the 112th convention and will be looking at all of these things, including the fact that much needs to be addressed for upgrading and increasing services to people in their communities, to improving education, to improve social conditions, to provide jobs and job training, better housing, as well as substance abuse counseling and interventions, and to look at the general welfare of people no matter where they live. So I was encouraged to follow up on that and try to see what we can do in our neighborhood other than just read the news or hear about the next tragedy. So I wanted to list a few names that have come up since May the 25th, 2020, when our brother George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. This is a report for New Jersey. These are people who were killed by deadly force. Malik Canty, Timothy O'Shea in Morristown, Amir Johnson in Ventnor, Hassani Best in Asbury Park, Carl Dorsey in Newark, Roy Jekyll in Franklin Township. These were people in this list who had encounters and died in the presence of law enforcement during the 1 year period in New Jersey. Sergio Rodriguez, Totowa, unidentified male, 33 years old, on August the 4th in New Brunswick. Kyle May in Boonton, Joseph R. in Trenton, unidentified male on August the 6th in Galloway. Richard Boleen in Voorhees, and an unidentified male on January the 10th in Hopatcong. And these were those people who died being chased by a police vehicle in New Jersey in the 1 year period. Suk Lee, October the 22nd. Karan Roundtree, October the 27th in Bordentown Township. Rashad Muse on February the 6th. And these were deaths while either in prison or involvement with law enforcement. Chaz Hilliard on June the 29th at East Jersey State Prison. And of course, We want to highlight Maurice Gordon, who was on the turnpike and was driving at a high speed, pulled over. He said that someone was chasing him. He had been pulled over twice, but he wound up mortally wounded, as well as we remember in New York, Daniel Prude, who was without clothing running through the intersections and placed a spit cap on him. And eventually he died and police were present. Um, these bring to mind why people get so negatively involved when it comes down to talking about the police. When talking about law enforcement, many people turn off, tune out, do not want to be involved. And so, just like today, we have invited people and they're not on the call, but I wanted to bring up one more uh, item just to emphasize that I didn't know of this, but I certainly know of it now, that from 95 until 2020, 47 people died either after a police chase or were apprehended. And a report in the Times lists their names. They were all given to be victims of sickle cell trait. 47 people, and it did not matter where they were, their ethnic background, their uh, age, it did not matter. The report is really just astounding because you would think that, at least honestly, say we chased the person, they died. Khalfani, I see you. But that was not given. So I'm going to make sure, because I had a little trouble trying to do it, I'm going to make sure that I send you this complete article. And its correct title in the New York Times is "For the Police, a Genetic Alibi Provides Cover." And certainly it's an atrocity. It shows these brothers here, Lamont Perry, Dean Smith, and Jason Pierce, all who died either after a police chase or while in custody, uh, coast to coast, you might as well say. So we see that the NAACP is encouraging us to move forward. We have these bills that I've sent, and certainly I want to rush through them, but I know that some of you on this call can give more information because you have been more involved than I have. Now, on the Civilian Complaint Review Board, A4656, we know that it has been tabled. And today we read in the article, Civilian Police Oversight Bill pulled for now. This article by Blake Nelson, who has been covering Edna Mahan and all kinds of prison stories. It indicates that under the proposal, towns or counties would have the option of appointing at least 3 people to the Civilian Complaint Review Boards, and that they can dig up allegations of excessive force, of lying, of offensive language, and abuse of authority. And if a resident files a complaint, the Civilian Complaint Review Board would first have to pass the complaint to a police department's internal affairs division. Oh boy. If officers decided not to investigate, or hadn't completed an investigation after 120 days, the Civilian Complaint Review Board could subpoena witnesses and documents for its own inquiry. Boards also would have to alert prosecutors if cops were suspected of breaking the law and then wait for any criminal investigation to end. If a board eventually concluded an officer had broken the rules and recommended discipline, the public would largely stay in the dark. So I don't know that that is the best of the considerations. What does anyone feel about that?
Yeah, Sister Kay, if you don't mind, just a brief interruption. The other member of Morris County NAACP that's here is Reverend Herman Scott, and he's the chaplain to our prison system on a daily basis. And I know that he has another meeting, and I appreciate him being here. And I would just like his reaction, hands-on, on what he sees on a daily basis in the system, if you don't mind, okay?
Reverend Scott, please.
Yes. Good afternoon, Sister Khalfani, and thank you. There has been an invitation of me from the local prosecutor's office to participate in a simulation, and that simulation was a process where there was about 300 different scenarios where police officers have to make a decision in terms of use of force. I was invited to be a part of this process and have done so for at least 2 times. What I have discovered is that, at least here in Morristown, there is a effort to embrace the community to enhance or to make sure that the use of force policy of New Jersey is communicated throughout the community. And it has been a slow process. But as far as the correctional process in the jail, there is the utmost integrity of law enforcement there to make sure that everybody in the facility is safe. And I'm a part of that safety initiative to ensure that persons within the jail are not harmed, even though there are times where violence is expressed inside the jail via the inmates. But also, as far as the community is concerned, there is a misunderstanding or lack of communication in terms of the use of force policy, wherein the policy itself has 7 elements, and the last element, of course, is the use of deadly force.
Yes.
I also understand that there is a culture within the police department, because part of the policy says that a police officer has the right to interrupt any negative behaviors from another police officer, especially when it's breaking protocol. Okay. However, my concern is that I understand culture and the influence of culture in terms of behavior. How comfortable does a junior officer have when he or she is exposed to aberrant behaviors of a senior police officer, and to correct that police officer if they view them doing something terribly wrong? So there's a whole host of things that are going on, at least here in Morris County, in terms of correcting and to ensuring police behavior is not a use or misuse of force. I'm very much concerned about the public opinion to dismantle or to defund the police department, because to do so would endanger the greater part of our public and our community. However, I do agree that we need to have some type of board/committee to check the police departments, if you will, and to ensure that they are following their own protocol, because that is the problem. You have, and I've had several conversations with correction officers and some of the police. They're very much worried about the negativity of the public toward them, because it increases violence toward them. At the same time, there's a concern that the police, if you will, here in Morris County do their jobs. And this is a desire from other police officers who feel that by the police officer not doing his or her job, it increases the likelihood that the public opinion would increase negatively toward them.
I understand. Well, I see in my neighborhood, which is Irvington, Essex County, where we have dense population, that we definitely will follow what the national NAACP has suggested. I think we need retraining. We had a community patrolling concept going prior to last year's turmoil. And I thought it worked very well because the community policing meant that the officers would become familiar with whoever's in their neighborhood
Community.
patrol area.
Right.
However, I did not see much communicated to the public. So it's more or less, if you weren't looking, you might get the idea, well, whatever we see in the news, that's what's going on. And we can't trust the police. So I wrote a recent article, probably nobody get to read it because it's in the local press, but, and that, circulation is short. But I think that what should happen moving forward is that there should be community focus groups who offer input ongoing. It doesn't have to be every month or every week, but certainly there needs to be a convening of these types of groups so that whoever is concerned and interested, that they would have input. Now, sometimes, there's a bad cop and that person needs to find another occupation. Sometimes there is a misunderstanding. Other times there's a trouble area where people are just acting out all the time, But there needs to be, I think, a dialogue, at least a way to communicate, at least, with what's going on with policing and patrolling. What do we need, and how can we make that happen? In Irvington, we have tried that a few times, but depending on who is in charge of the police department, now called public safety, we didn't get very far. I believe that that needs to be a consideration, but I think groups like the NAACP and those that are aligned with that thought need to make that demand and need to continue to make the demand until it happens. Because certainly in dense populations like we have, there may be robberies or there may be assaults, there could be people shot. And of course, now we know in the last 3-4 weeks that it is reported and documented that there are more guns being bought. Now, the people didn't buy them just to, and these are the ones that come by way of a license, but they didn't buy them just to be looking at them or hold them in a gun shop. They're going to use these instruments, and I'm not comfortable with what I see. I think a lot comes from the political climate. I think a lot comes from maybe misinformation over time. But I think we see a very, very, very difficult situation going to happen as our people move into traveling around. I see a very, very deadly situation coming up. And certainly the reports of gatherings of younger people have made me concerned also, because at some point, there's got to be control. Go right ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I do agree with the community review board. That's something necessary for the involvement of the community along with law enforcement. But I also think, and I've had several conversations about the administrative group and law enforcement, at least here in Morristown, And that question is, what are we doing to evaluate new police officers from a psychological perspective? Because we need ways and means of exposing the rogue cop before he or she does commit some infraction, if you will.
Sure.
I'm not sure if there's things in place that will evaluate a police officer unless it is event driven. Let me explain that. When a police officer does use force, he or she then is taken through an evaluation process to check their mental status. I think to some degree we should do that pre-hiring of the police officer to ensure some way that we have a net, if you will, that will weed out the rogue cop, if you will. And I know that's a complicated process, but I think that's something we need to do. We need to push from the NAACP perspective to ensure the police departments are doing something to make sure that they bring in the best candidate possible.
I think that is a point. I see Khalfani, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes. Good evening. I won't be able to, I have another meeting at 7 o'clock, but a couple of things I wanted to offer. One is in reference to the point that was just made, that I know a lot of times in police departments, when they're in the hiring process, there is a psychological evaluation component to the hiring process. But I'm a sociologist, and I think that just in my evaluation of things, I think that there needs to be ongoing psychological evaluations and training of officers, both correction officers and officers who walk who are on the beat, because the ongoing trauma that they encounter and maybe even their home situations that kind of impact their that may, if they have a situation at home where they're, maybe they're divorced or divorcing or something else, or just something traumatic at home, and then they come to work and bring that trauma with them to work, then now you have a new set of issues that they're bringing.
Yes, sir.
Now they may take that out on the people whom they're encountering, right?
Yes, sir.
So I think that that's another important component. But the other thing I think in terms of training, I think police training, and I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, and I was a member of the LAPD Explorers. And our Explorer training is long as some of the police training today. And that was just for kids, unfortunately, in terms of the length of the training. But I think that, when an officer is trained, I think that they need to go through that training needs to be equivalent to what a bachelor's is, because they're doing some very kind of serious work. They need to, best defense. They need lots of psychological training. They need sociological classes. They need psychological classes. They need training in mental health of patients, of people, and lots of training in de-escalation, right? Because I think that things become escalated instead of de-escalating. And then the other part is that one of the things, and I want to mention that I was at the protest, the rally that happened in Trenton yesterday, and I want to share a little bit of what happened there, because some Assembly people came out. Mayor Baraka was there. A bunch of us were there, and we spoke at the thing, just to kind of give some other background to some of the things you were talking about before. But I think that that one of the challenges that we have is that officers oftentimes act in fear. And the fear is the reprisal from the types of things that have happened in the past to people. And you alluded to this, and then they respond viscerally, not really appreciating the humanity of the people whom they're interacting with, due to race, class, gender, and also these the fear of the things that they've done potentially coming back to haunt them, or maybe not them particularly, but that officers have done, and that now they have this fear that these people in particular, primarily African Americans and Latinos, are going to mete out on them the things that they've seen in public and that they do. And we can't, in this process, we can't deny racism. That rogue cop is not necessarily a rogue cop, because sometimes these things are institutional. and we have to
Yes.
look at the institutional problems that are
As well.
therein as well.
Exactly.
So, but and I'll close out on this piece, and that is that one of the things that happened yesterday was that when the Assemblywoman, Assemblywoman McKnight came and spoke and addressed the audience, she was talking about, or the crowd, she was talking about, what all the things that you mentioned that are in the legislation. But one of the things that was in there, and I'm glad to a certain extent that they tabled it, because one of the things that was in there, even though it said they have investigative power, that if you read down in the changes later on down in the document, some of the things that they say is that not only is it 120 days, so there's not concurrent investigations. They also suggested that if local, state, and or federal authorities want to look at the matter, then they have up to a year to do so. And that if they start their investigation, that you have to wait. And if they have after that year is up, then they can let you know that they're still in progress. And then you have another quarter before that they have to report to you again. So they can carry the investigation on and say that it's being investigated for years without actually having to move anything forward on that. And so then that becomes yet another kind of a problem. So I think we have to think about those things that are in there that are very problematic, and it undermines the investigation. So if you're not doing concurrent investigation, if the investigation can be pulled by federal, state, and county authority out of the hands of the municipality or the CCRB, then it undermines it. And it says in there the changes. So a lot of people didn't get to see the changes because I don't know if it was a public document or not. The other thing that it said in there was that you what was the other point? There's another point that said something to the effect that their investigation, that if something came up, first of all, it had to be turned over to the internal affairs, and if they decided not to do it, then the CCRB can take it and look at it. But if they decided to do it, then that pulls it from the CCRB, and the CCRB cannot actively go out. They have to look. If they see a case and it thinks that it merits it, they can't go out and reach out to the people and tell them to come and file a complaint with the CCRB. They have to wait until the people come to the CCRB and file a case. So those are kind of tying the hands of CCRB, which is, I think, is problematic.
Yeah, it's hog-tied, I think. And I warned one brother who is new at this, that you have to look at these bills. You can't just support a bill because it's a bill. It starts out, and then on the day you're going to vote, it's quite something different. And it doesn't matter too much the subject. It's just going to allow things to continue as they have been. And that's the tragedy of the whole thing. But I think you have to keep pushing forward, because we do know that the Assembly and Senate are going to close down for re-election time. So they're going to draw this out again. But that means to come back stronger. And that means to gather more people so that everyone will know. That's one thing the national NAACP President Johnson is talking about, to make sure that everybody knows the same information, so then they can take action on it. Because certainly if we presented that kind of thing, let's say I just place his name to Abdul Wakil Kamal's family, what would they say? He was the man backed into the hedges and shot 13 times in Irvington on a call of domestic violence, which there wasn't any, but that's what they said. And so when we got involved in that, went down to the prosecutor's office, And the first thing that Mrs. Sproul said was, well, you know, he's been convicted. So I'm sitting there, oh, what did that have to do with this? Because he's dead now, he can't come back to tell the story, and they did not investigate. They did not go out to see the witnesses. It was just all trumped up kind of thing. And we should not be able to hear that stuff, and we certainly cannot tolerate it anymore, seeing those things that happen. Breonna Taylor should have been walking in to the department to give her statement. I read what 4 or 5 women had researched of her life and so forth, and of what actually was reported that happened. She wasn't the culprit. She wasn't even the person that was supposed to be spotted. That just happened. But similar things do happen, and I can say that because similar things happen to me. I just happened not to open the door, and they didn't knock the door down. But you know, a general practice or procedure may not be called for in every case, and I think Breonna Taylor spells that was the case that I think of mostly, of overacting and not following good protocols. And so I thank you, Brother Khalfani and Reverend Scott, because definitely we have to stay involved. We must be on top of these things. We must not give up, and we must say to everyone else, well, it was worth us going to Trenton. It was worth us going and participating. It was valuable to have these things going on, because if Bonnie Kerness didn't blow the whistle and say something about Edna Mahan, which we're getting to, we wouldn't hear anything about it. Well, we say, oh, status quo. And it's not supposed to be that way. We are supposed to do better. We are supposed to be able to protect our brother man, our fellow woman, our person of character and faith. And those who didn't make it, try to get them there as fast as we can. Um, so I thank you. We're going to just mention 3 of the other bills, and then we're going to go on to Edna Mahan as our time is fleeting. And they are, and I think they deserve our attention also. A4224, and if you didn't receive it, I will send it. The
Okay.
chokehold ban, that hasn't had a hearing, but of course we remember that several of our victims were victims of chokehold. I can't breathe. Okay. Then we have A5301 and companion bill S2656 on police transparency. That has to do with having public access to misconduct. I am disappointed that our Attorney General Grewal is happy to say we can possibly get the records of police back to 2020, when we know that some people have histories, some law enforcement have histories of misconduct. But he announced, oh, we have passed this bill. And the last 2 are of concern also. A4578, the New Jersey Tort Claims Bill, which involves eliminating qualified immunity, which would mean that the public can see the misconduct records of law enforcement. And of course, if the NAACP can move it, and I think they might be able to, they would get to free up the possibility that any records could be missing or lost or unreported, as law enforcement has been charged and has been able to move from agency to agency or department or to department, or be rehired after being fired because their police union said so.
Said so, right?
Yeah. And the last one is 4663, Companion Bill S 2924, which we won't get to these today, but this one is called Restorative and Transformative Justice for Youth Pilot Plan. Now, when reading it, and I thank Mr. Kaiser, our political action person in the Irvington NAACP, it was such a bill that it had no teeth. But I read an op-ed, I believe, last week, which was from the proposed person to lead this plan. And it looked just like, to me, it was a proposal that he had. And I was disappointed because it doesn't talk about youth getting a GED. It doesn't talk about youth getting supports. And this is for youth who would be leaving incarceration. My big problem is what happened to the youth who were first offenders? What happened to juvenile conference committee? What happened to supports when you're starting to get in trouble? And that needs to be addressed, definitely, because there are girls and fellows who, if supported, if mentored, if given proper resources, I don't think would come into incarceration. I really don't think so. There's a kind of ancient type of concept, but it works to have pre intervention programs for our youth. They don't have to be going off to jail. So I just mentioned them because we don't have time today, and I wanted Bonnie Kerness has consented to be on today, just to give some insight into what's going on at Edna Mahan Prison, which was called Clinton, and what we can look forward to in terms of working to help the women who are there in a prison facility that is slated to be closed at some point.
Right.
So, Bonnie, take the floor.
So, I mean, a couple of comments on what happened already. I think the whole concept of civilian review for me is really civilian monitoring. And that's much, for me, much larger than just the police. One of the things that happened with the women is they were beaten on January 11th and 12th, and they were beaten in solitary confinement. And from the letters that I got, they had been in solitary confinement for a long time. Now, for 4 years, we worked on passing the Isolated Confinement Restriction Act.
Right.
We worked on it. We got it passed. Christie vetoed it. We got it passed again, and it flew. So that, but that once the bill got passed, we as advocates are guilty of not monitoring it.
Okay.
Nobody monitor it. So those women were in solitary confinement. They were in a space where they weren't supposed to be. Just, pivoting, back to some of this stuff, some of the discussion so far. So that would be one thing I thought of. The other thing is that for my generation to talk about the police as if that's singular, as if it's not Border Patrol, corrections officers, National Guard. In my generation, the National Guard killed children on Kent and Jackson State campuses,
Right.
A Black campus and a white campus, parole, probation. These all impact, and they're all a police force. So to isolate city police, we need to just change that thinking. This is a police state. I have had children tell me that the police are an occupation army. I had one child tell me he was stopped in Newark for wandering.
Of course,
Huh?
of course.
Yeah. So when we talk about civilian review, for me, it's civilian monitoring, much larger than just civilian review. One bill I'd love us to watch for, and it's not on the floor yet, it's being written, is a bill that would reinstate the Office of the Public Advocate. And
Oh,
within that Office of the Public Advocate, there would be an advocacy on behalf of children. There would be an advocacy, they call it Office of Inmate Advocacy. I mean, they're crowding it with advocate offices, advocate sections. I don't know what the final bill would look like, but it's something that I've been pushing for a very long time. Like the doctor, I also have to go at 7. So just very quickly, the situation at Edna is pretty interesting at this point. When I got that first letter talking about the beating, screaming for help, you know, the woman said, it was maybe 5 or 6 lines. She said, they're killing us. They wanna kill us. I did not write to the Department of Corrections. I was so upset. I wrote to every female legislator that I could turn up. And I wrote to every reporter who was covering the criminal legal system beat. So I think it was really more so than anything I did that the reporters bit, and they bit very hard, and they did some pretty deep coverage. And the legislators were outstanding. I mean, they were wonderful. They became advocates. And it all goes back to the women themselves who wrote out, who were brave enough to write out after being absolutely brutalized. Clinton has been a brutal place for 30 years. Right now, today, it is no longer that space. And we have to be there, mentally questioning every article. They have a new administrator. The women are telling me she's dynamite. I said before, we have a commissioner, a new assistant commissioner of women, who I am meeting with, and I'm going to talk to her about what Kathleen said very early on about promoting visits with children. And I got a call last week from the commissioner, the acting commissioner of corrections. I can't think of her name, but it is a woman. She expects to be there for 9 months, and literally said, let's see what we can do in 9 months. So
Can you send that letter out?
Excuse me?
Can you send that Can you send a copy of that letter? The one you said you worked on?
Sure. And sure, it was probably the most unprofessional letter I ever wrote in my life. I was so upset.
Bonnie,
Yeah.
I have a question. Being that I work at the Morris County Correctional Facility, we are hearing at least that there's an initiative to dismantle Edna Mahon and to send the women back to the place of their original offense. Is there any truth to that at all?
I don't think so. I think they're struggling with it. The facilities in New Jersey, and it's not just the women's prison, they're full of mold. They're full of water dripping from ceilings. They're toxic. Some of them have been built on toxic sites. So there are many good reasons for closing the buildings. I'd like to see, and the women would like to stay on that campus. In conversations with the woman who is charged. It's this assistant commissioner of women. There are about 350 women there. 100 of them, at least 100 of them, qualify for release to halfway houses. So that leaves 250 women. And what they're looking at is, and I don't know if I'm giving up any secrets, but there's another campus that's a juvenile girls campus called Hayes, and I'm not familiar with it. And they're looking at that. That would, what they're telling me is that that might be able to replicate the freedom of movement that the women have. The women themselves would like to stay there and would like to have the kind of programming that could really be best practices.
Right.
And the officials that I've spoken to are, although they're focused on the women, are understanding that things need to expand into the men's facilities. When you talk about changing the culture, I don't believe you can train a culture.
No.
Nor do I believe that legislation produces social change. I forgot my train of thought. Oh, the governor hired a group called the Moss Group and is paying them $1.3 million for a 2-year contract. And that's each year, $1.3 million to change the culture of the officers at Edna Mahan.
Did I hire you?
See, well, it's, to me, I don't believe you can train that culture. I think it goes back to what the doctor said in terms of who do you hire and how do you hire them? What process do they have to go through to be hired for these very sensitive positions? You know, how do you oversee another human being without some kind of discomfort? So I'm also in conversation with the Moss Group. They are very impressive, but I don't know what kind of cultural change they really have accomplished in their work.
$1 million, they should be working a miracle.
It would be a miracle. So.
Is this a New Jersey group, the Lost Group?
No, it's a national group. They've done, my understanding is that they've done work in Michigan and Alabama, and I haven't seen anything of substance to corroborate that they haven't done well there. I've had, you know, women in prison tell me that they don't see any great cultural change, but I haven't seen anything of substance.
Hey, Bonnie,
Yeah.
does this, is it Moss Group?
MOSS.
Okay,
Oh.
do they work specifically with correctional facilities / prisons?
Yep,
Okay.
it looks like, with the exception of 1 or 2 of them, they all come out of or have had experience with corrections.
Okay.
Oh, well, our time has come, and we are not going to give up on this topic. We must move forward. I want to ask you if all can be returning to a virtual meeting in 3 weeks. Is that
Okay.
something we can do?
Sure, that's
Sure.
fine. Sounds good.
Want you-
That's
Absolutely.
doable. Yeah, that's doable. Yeah.
Yeah, I want you to
Can
get more and
can
more
I
people
just,
that are of like minds.
Sister
So
Kay,
that they can have input.
Sister Kay,
All right.
Don't want to
Thank you. I
limit-
have to leave, but
Okay.
I appreciate you.
yeah, but
Well, you
keep in
know what?
mind, Sister Kay, next month is
Somebody
the
has to do
national.
something, right? And we had a great meeting this evening. Al Tariq didn't get a chance to say anything, but he's driving.
Yeah, I was just taking all the information in. I was listening.
I'm glad to see you, Al Tariq.
Yeah, me too. How you doing, Bonnie?
He'll be coming on. He has a lot of background to help with us. I know we're older, you know, but he'll be coming on.
Speak for yourself.
And I certainly thank you, Dr. Khalfani, putting words right out of my mouth. I have something I'm going to forward to you all in the meantime, which is just my notes on some things about Edna Mahan, halfway house and so forth. And I want everyone, you know, just don't worry about it, chime in. But we're going to meet and ask Dr. Kalina to be our hostess again. So please, everybody, make sure we have your contact, Reverend Herman, and
Okay.
I will certainly reach out for you. I want to thank you just so much. Khalfani, you keep us posted. And please.
I will send those. I sent two letters to the legislature.
All right.
I will send those, I guess, to you.
Yeah, you can send them.
And you can send them out.
Yeah, I'll send them out. And I'll also send out those articles I want you to read, everyone. Hey,
Yes, please, please.
Yes.
how are you? All right. So please, everyone, I thank you. And this has been interesting. Gather up more minds so that we can get something straight. I won't give up on this. This is too important. This is just too important to keep everybody moving, to keep it rolling in the right direction. And if we can get our chance to have something to say, we want to make sure we use it. So have a good evening, everyone, and stay posted. Please send me anything you care. It's kwitcher2000@yahoo.com. Most of you know it already, but I'll be in touch. And Lloyd, we didn't get you to say anything, but we're looking forward, okay?
Okay.
All right.
All right,
Thanks,
I
ma'am.
thank you. Have
Thank
a
you.
Right.
Good night.
good
All
night.
right. Good
Good
night,
night,
everybody.
Good night, Kathleen.
Thank you,
All right,
everyone.
Good night, Kathleen.
Mhm. Mhm.
Interesting.
Mhm.